theater. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. And no, thanks for saving me time in terms of saying what I've done. So this is great. It's type 15. Okay, I hope you're done. Okay, so I just to give you a teeny bit of extra context. I've been doing theater, since like community theater way back in elementary school, high school, all that stuff. And then I spent some time in Chicago after college doing site-specific theater in Chicago, which is what we called it then. Then I moved to LA about 10 years ago, and slowly over the course of that decade, found my way back to theater, and specifically to immersive theater. And 3 years ago, Monica Miklas, my producing partner, and I founded Capital W, and we really specialize in intimate, small audience immersive theater. We are about to launch sort of a second branch of the company. It's cool, it's just going to be serious, guys.
So that feels appropriate after this fall, that's fine. I had to say it. There was just too many men at my back pocket not to say it. Cool. So anyway, Capital W has only done small audience stuff up to now, but we are about to launch a sort of second branch of our work that is going to start to see how we can scale up that work. I'm not going to talk about it here today. I'm just going to talk about some of our past shows, particularly in light of this topic, nonlinear storytelling. So because I'm first up here, I thought I should be the one to try to brave the definition question. So I'm going to throw out here what nonlinear storytelling means to me. So it covers a couple things for me. One is, on the simplest level, it's a previously linear story told out of order. Right, that's everybody, the example we'll all know is the movie Pulp Fiction, right? I took a story that I could have told with normal cause and effect, starting earlier, going to later in time, but I chopped it up and I told it in a different order. The second kind of nonlinear storytelling, and this is the kind I think you see a lot in immersive theater, I call it collage storytelling. So it's a story that the audience accumulates in pieces, right? And maybe those pieces have an obvious relationship to each other, maybe they don't. But it's a series of little pods, right? If people ever saw Then She Fell in New York, that I would call collage storytelling. And 2 of our shows have worked that way. And last but not least, you could say that it's a story that does not use traditional cause and effect to create meaning, right? We have an experience with the character does something, and then in the next scene, something unrelated is happening. It's sort of the opposite of how we all feel like real life works, right? Well, yeah, that's a whole topic for another topic to see if we all really do this, how life works. Okay, so my question is, we should all think about it a little bit here, is why has this become so popular in immersive theater? I'm noticing this kind of nonlinear storytelling everywhere that I see shows. And I think that's exciting in a lot of ways, because I love that we're getting outside of the traditional linear narrative box as an art form. But I'm wondering if we're at a point where we should take a look at it, nonlinear storytelling, and ask ourselves, why are we doing it? What are we getting out of it? What is it actually good for? So I think a couple reasons it's popular in immersive theater is that it lends itself to multi-track experiences, right? If I'm telling a story that doesn't have to be accumulated in a certain order, then I can create multiple tracks more easily, which then increases the number of audience members that I can get through my show in a night. Multiple tracks means I can get through more audience members, right? Also, it allows for repeated scenes. I craft a really wonderful experience where Alice is feeding me the oranges, that's from Then She Fell, and then I can do that a couple times in the night, right? If it doesn't matter kind of where it goes in someone's arc of scenes. So nonlinear storytelling allows for repeated scenes, which kind of gets to my last point, which is I think it seems easier to write. I think writing something that adds up to more than the sum of its parts is really challenging. As anyone who's tried to do it can tell you, I feel that it's quite challenging. Even in order. I mean, trying to write a screenplay, a larger play, a novel, it's challenging. Now, it's easy to think that if I do a series of little experiences and they're all really fun and exciting on their own, that will be easier for me to tackle. But we'll come back to that a little bit. I think it's really not. So, when it's really working on linear storytelling, here's what I love about it. I love that it kind of unmoors the audience, right? Our normal life is cause and effect, cause and effect. I wake up, I'm hungry, I eat food, I'm no longer hungry, right? That's how the world works. So when I come into a show that doesn't have linear cause and effect, I think it's exciting. It wakes me up. I know I have to be on guard in a good way as an audience member. So that's a real asset to nonlinear storytelling. It also allows the audience an authorial role. They have to create their own meaning, right? They have these two random scenes that they just experienced back to back. It's up to the audience to interpret what they think it means. And that's exciting. That's like a real gift that we can give the audience. It also creates unexpected meanings as you put things that were previously disparate next to each other, right? So what does it mean if I talk to the Mad Hatter in one scene and then I talk to the Queen of Hearts in the next scene? That might enlighten a new aspect of the Alice in Wonderland story I hadn't previously thought about. So it's a very exciting way of telling a story. And I think there are a lot of assets to it. But I think there are also some things we need to be careful of or cautious about. So at worst, which is overstating it a bit, but some of the possible drawbacks are, when I see a nonlinear story that I don't think has been thought through, it can feel really chaotic or just unclear, right? We can lose meaning. We need to be careful of that. This is my pet peeve. This is coming up so much for me right now. There's no climax or rising energetic action, right? It's just a series of little pods, and each one I have to raise the energy again, and then I have to raise it again, and I have to raise it again, as opposed to feeling like I had this. Now, maybe you don't want to make a piece of art that does that. That's fine. But I think we need to be conscious of the potential pitfall of the flat energy, right? I've definitely experienced this one. It's a show that feels kind of like an idea brainstorm. Like the creators are just riffing, trying out little different scenes, and I paid $40, $60, $100 for it, and it feels like a show to me. So I want it to feel finished and polished, even if it is nonlinear. This is an interesting one, especially in light of Sarah's talk this morning. I never get fully invested in any character or moment. So I think one of the reasons nonlinear storytelling is becoming so popular in immersive is also because it's a great way to come at multiple viewpoints, right? We were talking about this earlier, like if I can't cut between characters' viewpoints, how do I get multiple viewpoints? Well, jumping into different characters' viewpoints in different scenes is a great way to try to do it. And we are seeing that a lot in immersive theater. But we have to be careful then, because if somebody in the audience is not exposed to a particular character multiple times, or maybe they don't get exposed to a character in your show at all, did they really get that person's viewpoint? No, probably not. So there's a lack of investment that can come. There's a distance, an emotional distance we can see in this work if we're not careful. And then lastly, this sort of sums up all the other ones really. It's a series of moments that add up to nothing. It is not more than the sum of its parts. And that's probably the sort of umbrella caution with this kind of work. And I don't mean to start in a negative way, because I love nonlinear storytelling, but I just want to share some of the pitfalls and values that I've seen in it, and I'm going to talk about it now in light of some of our work. So Hamlet Mobile was the first show Capital W did. There is the Hamlet Mobile itself. That's a really early version of it, where all we kind of had was the money to make one sort of backdrop or sign that we magneted up to the side of the van. And Hamlet Mobile, I'll just tell you a little bit how the story structure worked. So it was 8 short 15-minute pieces, and they were each inspired by a different moment, character, or theme from Shakespeare's Hamlet. They involved Shakespearean language and modern language. There were 4 point-of-view characters, Hamlet, Ophelia, Gertrude, Claudius, and different pieces went into the different characters' points of view, sometimes multiple characters' points of view within one piece. It also had a meta-narrative, just to make things extra challenging for us. So the meta-narrative was that you were also following and unraveling the story of the fictional theater company that actually created and staged Hamlet Mobile. And that fictional theater company was called The Moving Shadow, and it was trying to process through the death of its artistic director, a sort of like megalomaniac, narcissist kind of a guy. And although all the 4 actors were all processing their own grief by living out the grief themes in Hamlet. And you only really put that together if you came back for multiple pieces. We foregrounded it a little bit when you showed up to check in for the Hamlet Mobile. There was a little zine we gave you that told you about, not capital W, but about the fictional theater company. So that kind of was the doorway we walked you through, and then you had to do the work of figuring out the rest of the backstory about the company. It was for audiences of 1 to 4 people. So like I said, small audiences, very low throughput, very, very low. So the way that we did ticketing and the economics of this, we gave this piece away for free. I'll just tell you right now, there were no economics to it. So what we would do is word of mouth and sort of the secrecy of the piece and creating sort of natural organic buzz was really important to us. So what we did is we would announce where the Hamlet Mobile was going to be each day on that day over our Twitter feed. And we would be like, we parked at this corner at this intersection, and here the piece we're doing today is the one called Crown Ambition Queen, which was a Claudius Gertrude duet. And we're going to be doing that from 4 to 6. Whoever comes now, first come, first serve. So people would rush over to sign up, and then we would run that individual 15-minute piece on a loop for 2 to 3 hours. Okay? And we gave people little punch cards that had the names of all 8 pieces, and when they came to multiple pieces, we punched the card. And if they collected all 8, they got a free bumper sticker that said, my other car is Macbeth. And so that's, yes, thank you. Yes. Like I said, it was free. It was built for the Hollywood Fringe Festival. And it really worked best in a festival context where people were all hanging out anyway and had like 15 minutes to kill, and we're like, oh, I can just catch the Hamlet Mobile. We tried a professional ticketed run later that was less successful, which I'll talk about in a bit. So I think something that we were aiming for that I do think worked is that you could see an individual piece and it felt like a complete short play, and you could collect all 8 and you got a bigger play. It was a real range. Some people saw 1. Most people saw 2 to 3, I want to say, and a small core group saw 8, including Noah. Thank you. And so now just to sort of share, I'll just show you some of the photos of the Hamlet Mobile. That's Hamlet and Ophelia doing Get Thee to a Nunnery. Here is Claudius demanding something from Gertrude. Here's Claudius talking to one of our audience members. As you can see, we tried to use all aspects of the van. The van really felt like it was a truck taken on the road by this theater company, The Moving Shadow. So it was full of there was a props area, and there was a little library. There was a shrine to the dead artistic director. So there was just little spaces. Our incredibly talented production designer, a woman named Shing-Yin Kaur, who's actually here. She's not in this room, but she's at the summit right now. She's this amazing installation artist. She does huge immersive environments at Burning Man. She's amazing. You should talk to her. She did the Hamlet Mobile for us. We're really excited about how it turned out. And there we are doing our riff on the dumb show from the middle of the play. And then we've got Ophelia making origami flowers, and we've got Gertrude praying. There was a little flip down shrine under the, what is that called, the visor. And then there was one piece that was more like street theater, where we careen up to the curb and just spill out and start acting. And that turned into this sort of giant sword fight from the end of the play, where everybody dies. It ended with all 4 of the actors dying miserable deaths. And then here is, it's a little hard to see here, but this is a riff on, this is basically dead King Claudius's body being cleaned by a couple of people. And that turned into the appearance of the ghost. And one of the cool things we got to play with was recasting the van itself. So the audience was perennially recast, but so was the van. So in this piece, the van was definitely a hearse, and there was a dead body in the back. So it was always a little bit different. Okay, so just quickly, what worked? What did we learn? So I think our separate experiences were individually satisfying, particularly because we got to remount it and rewrite some of the weaker ones over time. I do think the separate experiences did add up to a larger story for those who decided to collect more than one. I think ultimately, if you saw all 8 pieces, you got a real balance of the 4 characters' viewpoints. And I think, again, if you saw all 8 pieces, there was a real 50-50 balance between Hamlet narrative and meta-narrative. Some of the pieces you'd show up and it would be riffing on Hamlet, but it would actually all be through the lens of one of the actors talking about the dead artistic director. You wouldn't get one lick of Shakespeare. So it really depended on the piece. And the food truck model was a great way to build up our social media feed and word of mouth buzz, which helped us for our next show. So giving the show away for free was a great way to start launching Capital W as a brand, so that when we did our next show, we had a whole bunch of people who were following us. Okay, what did we learn? Some people liked collecting them all, but most people did not. Most people did not come to all 8. Partially, it was hard to get to all 8 and get in. You had to be super on it. But also, most people aren't diehard fans. So just statistically, it's important to know if you're doing something like this where you're collecting little individual pieces, most people aren't going to do most of it. People, like I said, did 2 to 3 on average. When we tried to monetize it and do a ticketed version, it was less successful. We definitely had unsold slots, which of course had never happened when it was free. And I think it's partially because 15 minutes is just too short of an experience for people to get in their car, drive somewhere, find parking in LA, do 15 minutes, and then go back home. And because it's an individual experience often, there's no one to share it with. So they leave and they're like, there's no one to talk to about it. So that did not work as well. It worked much better free at a festival. And like I said, limited throughput, that was not a problem for us, but it's fair to just name that is a hindrance for some people. And then it was very satisfying for Hamlet nerds, but people who didn't know Hamlet were definitely confused. I just want to name that. Which you're like, we're all theater nerds, so we're like, who could that possibly be? I'm like, it's some people for sure. So that's just something to think about. And now I'm just going to fly through our second nonlinear show. It was called And the Drum. This was our second major production. This was an adaptation of a Los Angeles poet's book of poetry. Her name's Martha Marion. And we actually staged it in Martha Marion's actual house in Koreatown in Los Angeles. It was partially a dinner party format, partially dance theater. The dinner party was sort of exploring external human behavior, and the dance theater was sort of every character's inner life. It was balancing 5 point-of-view characters. I'm sort of obsessed with how many point-of-view characters you have in your piece. That's why I keep coming back to this. I don't think we talk about it enough. It was ticketed. We were charging $35. We would charge more now, but at the time we were, again, growing our audience and our brand as a company. We got 12 people through a night, and I will say this show turned a profit. The show turned a profit. And then it was a combination of wide open sandbox moments and then guided tracks, and I'll show you a little flow chart right now. So the welcome, the dinner, the dance party, and the goodbye, those are big group moments where we had all 12 of the audience together. And then we would break them out into individual tracks. Then they would come back together for a big group and then individual tracks. When you launched on your first individual track, it didn't mean that you were on a particular track through the whole rest of the show. Every time we went back to a group segment, it was all mix-em-upsies again. So people could end up, and then suddenly they're doing something else, and then, so no two humans ever had the same show experience for sure, because it was just too randomized in the big group sections. Here are a few pictures. Here's the poet Martha, and this is the porch of her house. There's the audience listening. We fed the audience an actual dinner. With wine. Be careful how much wine you give your audience. It's just a little free advice right now. And if you notice this table, this next shot is under that same table later in the show. All the lights were turned off, and there was lighting, tap lighting, hidden under the table. And the dancers would turn on and off their own lights, which was really cool. Here's just 2 more fun dancing moments, using architecture in interesting ways. There was a dance on the roof. In fact, there was a whole little dessert and whiskey picnic for 2 audience members up on the roof. Something to think about with safety for another talk. Audience member watching a dancer and one of our actors looking creepy. Okay, so very, very quickly, what worked, what did we learn? Repetition of moments. It's your friend. We definitely use individual experiences more than once to fill it out, and that's a great thing to do, because if you have a moment that really does work, you should use it again, as long as someone's not going to see it twice. Audience members had a wide range of group and one-on-one experiences. Big full group and one-on-one for almost every audience member. Very important for me ethically, if you're going to start doing one-on-ones, that everybody get a real shot at one. I think we use the nonlinear format to explore a range of tones. I don't think art has to have a consistent tone the whole way through. It's your choice. And so for us, we really moved all over the tonal map in this one intentionally. We use nonlinear format to juxtapose inner and outer life in a successful way. And I think overall the piece did have a climax. That was a real focus for me, is can we do dance theater that has a narrative climax? And I think we did. But we learned a ton. All tracks are not created equal. Some of our experiences were not as strong, and I can admit that as a writer. Also, our experiments in random chance, like in the big group settings where people would switch and end up on a different track, that meant that some people really had an unsuccessful or more boring night. And then other people happened to get all the best one-on-ones, and then they had an amazing night. So that felt non-egalitarian and not really fair to me, and I would fix that if I was to do it again. We should have thought more about which characters audience members were following, so they either got equal access to all the points of view, all 5 points of view, or they individually followed one person the whole time. And not everybody experienced that climax I said that we did successfully do. I think the people who had the best tracks felt the climax, and I think the people who had the worst tracks didn't feel the climax, to put it simply. And then we didn't have enough time for testing with audiences and rewrites, which is massive. You're basically putting up your show twice. You're putting it up once to test, you go away and you rewrite, you put it up more. I can talk more about that in the Q&A, but yeah, I think that's good. I'll stop right there for now. Thanks for listening, guys.